Thanks everyone for joining and welcome to the 2023 Illinois Residential Stretch Code Workshop hosted by the Building Energy Hub and the International Code Council. My name is Katie Kaluzny, Deputy Director at Illinois Green Alliance and Director of the Building Energy Hub. Before we get started with today's session, I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the Stretch Code and the Building Energy Hub. On September 15th, 2021, Governor Pritzker signed a bill known as the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA. One of the most important aspects of this new law is a provision from the Capital Development Board to create a state energy stretch code. The new state energy stretch code provides a mechanism for jurisdictions throughout the state to raise the bar for energy efficiency, driving down future energy costs. The 2023 commercial and residential stretch energy codes became available for adoption January 1st, 2025, and the city of Evanston became the first municipality to adopt the stretch code in February 2025. Which goes into effect in Evanston October 1st. This webinar is going to familiarize those in the building industry with the amendments to the 2021 IECC that comprise the 2023 International Residential Stretch Energy Code. This course is eligible for AIA and ICC continuing education credits. We'll be sending a link in the follow-up email so you can ask for your credits. In addition, in that follow-up email, we'll have slides, resource links that we'll share with all of the attendees. And now let me share a little bit more about the Building Energy Hub before we get started. Next slide. The Building Energy Hub serves Illinois area stakeholders with the critical training and resources ensuring that the region can meet aggressive climate action goals with the building sector while building an inclusive green economy. The Hub collaborates with key partners to curate energy efficiency and financing best practices and serving as a one-stop shop, focusing on technical and actionable resources for building owners, operators, design professionals, and contractors. We do this through a number of partnerships, as you can see here on the slide, including staff, advisors, and volunteers as well, all in the mix, trying to make our resources as easy and accessible as possible. Next slide. The Building Energy Hub focuses on providing education and training to building professionals, working with contractors on getting access to resources, building capacity for advanced energy codes and policies, and streamlining access to finance resources. Today's session on understanding the implementation and compliance requirements of the residential stretch code is a perfect example of the type of education offerings that you'll find at the Hub. Next slide. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Jerica Stacy, Director of Technical Training at the International Code Council and an excellent partner of the Building Energy Hub. During today's session, Jerica will focus on the key amendments to the residential provisions, reasons behind the changes, impact these changes have on implementation and enforcement of the energy code. And then on Thursday, June 19th, we are hosting a similar session covering the commercial stretch code. You can check the chat for some great links throughout the webinar today and add your questions to the Q&A for us to address at the end of today's session. And now let me welcome Jerica to share a little bit more about herself and jump into our topic of the residential stretch code. Thanks, Jerica.
Thanks, Katie. As Katie mentioned, we are a proud partner of the Building Energy Hub, and I am so happy to be here with you all this afternoon. Thanks for taking an hour of your time to join us. Just make sure that I'm sharing okay. All right. So Katie already did a little bit of the introduction to the stretch code workshop that we're doing today. We are going to be focused on the residential provisions. As Katie mentioned, this material is based on work supported by the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy under the Building Technologies Office Award number that you see here on your slide. This helps us track the grant funding and also where that funding goes towards providing excellent resources to folks that are implementing and enforcing the energy code. Throughout today's presentation, I am going to drop some links into the chat. And for those of you that are happen to catch this on a replay, those resources are going to be listed at the end of today's presentation. Katie also has a number of resources listed as well that will be helpful in navigating the stretch code and understanding the requirements within them. So I'm going to start by just throwing in the read-only version of the energy code into the chat. So for those of you that like to follow along, this is a really great version of the energy code because not only, I'm going to throw it on the screen here so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. Not only are you going to see the changes that occurred in the 2021 IECC, which will be indicated in blue text like this, but you're also going to see the amendments to the 2021 IECC that are included as part of the Illinois Residential Stretch Code. Those will be in red text. So you can follow along if you'd like, and you can save that, mark that link for future use. The other link that I'm going to share with you right off the bat is a link to that Building Energy Hub. Katie mentioned already that we have a number of resources. They are geared towards various aspects of the industry, but the one that we're going to focus on today is under the Illinois Stretch Code Guides. There are guides in there, as well as some really awesome compliance checklists that were put together by other partners. We'll see a little glimpse of those in today's presentation. We are covering just those significant amendments. So we're not backing up and talking about the 2021 IECC too much. We're really going to be focusing on what was added to the 2021 IECC that results in the Stretch Energy Code. And Katie also already mentioned our objective, so I think we can skip along that here. My name is Jerica Stacy. I am the Director of Technical Training at the Code Council. My contact information is on the screen here. If you have any questions about anything energy code related, please reach out. I have a collection of resources on my desktop. I also am part of the energy team that we have here at the Code Council that provides energy code interpretations, or we're happy to look at whatever question you have and find an answer for you. So anytime you have a question, please reach out. And my phone number is also available there if you would prefer contacting me that way. All right, so let's dive in. We've only got about an hour together, so let's make some good use of it. We're going to start today's presentation by providing an overview of the 2021 IECC and the Illinois Stretch Energy Code. Talk a little bit about how they're related, but also to set the stage for why a lot of these provisions in the Stretch Energy Code are so important, not just to Illinois, but to the greater energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction goals. The 3 bullets you see on your screen right here, this is the actual intent section of the IECC. I pulled it out word for word just to set the stage for what to expect in the International Energy Conservation Code. So first, we're regulating the design and construction over that useful life of a building. So we're not only providing design guidelines or requirements, but we're also looking at how the building is constructed, what we need to be looking for as we enforce the energy code. And then there's also new provisions added to the energy code all the time that are really intended to help look at energy use over the useful life of that building. The code is also intended to provide flexibility. This is a key concept within the energy code. We see this by the choice of different compliance options. And then even within those compliance options, there are different pathways you can take to achieve compliance with the energy code. In addition to that, we also have the catch-all provision in the code that allows us to use alternative methods, alternative designs, different construction materials or construction methods to achieve the intent of the code, as long as the code official allows us to do so. And then finally, the code is not intended to abridge any other safety, health, life safety codes that you may have adopted in your jurisdictions. The energy code is really on top of those, but never takes precedence over those life safety provisions. The 2021 IECC is the base energy code for the state of Illinois. It became effective in January of 2024, and it does include some state-specific amendments. The Stretch Energy Code is based on that 2021 IECC with amendments that are really energy saving and readiness measures that we saw in draft versions of the 2024 IECC. And this is going to be effective January 1st, 2025. Katie already mentioned Evanston was the first to adopt. And where this code is adopted, it's going to supersede the Illinois Energy Conservation Code. We are just talking about residential provisions today. We'll cover commercial on Thursday. So I wanted to make sure that we are aware of the residential definition that is included in the Illinois Energy Conservation Code. because it is a little bit different than what we include in the base or model IECC. So for residential buildings in Illinois, your definition is going to include those detached 1 and 2 family dwellings, as well as occupancies that contain multiple dwelling units. And your definition is going to actually spell out what we mean by that: row houses, apartment houses, fraternity, sorority houses, those types of occupancies that we in the IECC just consider group R, group two, excuse me, R2, R3, and R4. And it does have that 3-story in height above grade plane threshold. Your definition continues on to say that where you have a population of over 1 million people, then the residential building term is going to be a building that contains one or more dwelling units not exceeding 4 stories above grade. So we do see an expansion of this definition for residential buildings in the state of Illinois. When we're thinking just about the 2021 IECC, I think it's important to understand some of the energy savings and emissions reductions that we get just from the model energy code. So every code cycle, the Department of Energy through Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and their Building Energy Codes program, they issue a determination. They look at the most recent version of the energy code and they compare it to the previous version to assess whether or not it provides additional energy efficiency. When we're talking about the 2021 residential provisions, that determination found about a 9% increase in energy savings over the 2018 IECC and similar carbon emission reduction savings as well. So this is really important for states that do have additional energy efficiency goals or have some kind of climate action plan or some other carbon conscientious policy. And when we compare the 2021 to the 2006 IECC, which we typically use as a baseline, it's considered to be one of the, if not the first modern energy code, we see about a 40% increase in efficiency between the 2021 and the 2006. Well, lucky for us, DOE through PNNL also did some analysis on the Illinois Residential Stretch Energy Code provisions as they were first proposed to be included in the residential portion of the code. Compared to the 2021 IECC, the Stretch Energy Code it will provide about 9.6% energy cost savings, life cycle energy cost savings of a little over $2,000, and we're talking about a 30-year period for those life cycle energy cost savings, and avoided future retrofit costs of about $6,500. So those retrofit costs are going to come into play when we talk about some of the provisions that don't necessarily impact the energy use of the building, but they do impact carbon, and future owners will have to cover that cost if they were not included within the Stretch Energy Code. So I'm going to put a link to that analysis. It's available online if you care to dig a little deeper into what that analysis says and how we're coming up with these values. In addition to those values, this analysis also estimated that over that 30-year period, the energy savings are collectively going to save about $2 billion in energy costs, and they're going to reduce statewide CO2 emissions by over 14 million metric tons, which is equivalent to just under 3.1 million cars. That 9.6% energy cost reduction that we saw on the previous slide, that's going to equate to almost $250, $248 of annual utility bill savings, so an average of that. So ultimately, what this analysis shows us is that the Stretch Energy Code is going to be more efficient, it's going to result in more affordable housing, and it's going to be designed to help us achieve some of those energy efficiency and health-related goals that we might have. And why do I think this is important? I always take my 2 minutes on a platform to discuss why I actually think that these energy cost savings have a really big impact on our community. Every 5 years or so, there is a residential energy consumption survey that comes out. The last one where we're still getting continuous data from this currently, but in 2020, we found that about 27% of US households, which is about 34 million US households, reported some difficulty either paying their energy bills or they kept their homes at unsafe temperatures to be able to afford to pay their energy bills. When we look at the same survey that was done 5 years previously, we do see a reduction in those households that are saying they're having difficulty meeting their energy bills. This particular survey attributes a lot of that reduction in energy costs to the continuous energy savings that the energy code provides. So each code cycle, we see those improvements in energy efficiency. Those are having a really big impact on us across our communities in being able to afford energy, the costs associated with, the energy of our homes. A more recent study done by IECC found that 1 in 4 low-income households spent over 15% of their income on energy bills. And this is really a significant finding because the burden, what is considered to be a severe energy burden is 10% of your income. So 1 in 4 low-income households are well over that severe energy burden of 10%. And we see this, they looked at a number of jurisdictions and across the US. Chicago was one of those, and Chicago is a little bit over that average, that 15% average that we see across the US, but there are jurisdictions that are reporting up to 26% of their income on energy bills. So any way that we can actually reduce that energy cost, which we can do so through updating or adopting a stretch energy code, is going to help our communities be more affordable. Links to these studies are going to be in the resource section of the PowerPoint as well. And Katie already hit on this a little bit, but we do have the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which includes some provisions that the Stretch Energy Code is going to support, right? So the 4 bullet points we see here on the slide, these are the main key goals of CEJA. It's going to incentivize renewable energy development, accelerate electric vehicle adoption, and expand charging station infrastructure, create statewide clean energy workforce training programs to ensure the workforce is prepared for the jobs of the future, and equitably support communities facing energy transitions, and much more. So we see a lot of the amendments that have occurred to the 2021 IECC actually support a lot of these bullet points for CEJA. Particularly, CEJA includes a site energy index goal where we are incrementally improving the site energy index of the energy code compared to the 2006 IECC. The ultimate goal is that we're going to achieve a site energy index of 0.25 of the 2006 IECC by the end of 2031, and we're going to do so incrementally. This stretch code is the first stretch code that is going to help achieve those CEJA goals. All right, so we're actually now going to dive into some of those specific amendments. I'm going to put in the chat, hopefully I was not sharing to everybody in the chat. My apologies, it was just on hosts. So I am going to include a link to CEJA from EPA.Illinois, and then also an update on their programs and the status of a lot of those programs in the chat as well. My apologies for not sharing those with everybody. All right, so chapters 1 through 3, these are typically what we would consider our administrative chapters of the Energy Code. There are a couple of significant amendments to mention. I'm also just going to kind of give you background for those of you that might be brand new to the Energy Code, a little background on what each chapter includes. So chapter 1, this is our scope and administration chapter. It's going to establish the applicability of the code. So this is where you're going to find that intent section we already discussed. It's going to include details on how the code is applied and enforced. So as part of that, we're going to find the requirements that apply to us as code officials. So what do we actually need to be looking for as we're doing our plan reviews? And then also what inspections should we carry out to enforce the energy code? And it's also going to include those responsibilities of the design professionals as well. So what needs to be included on those construction documents? There are just a few amendments to hit on within this chapter. The first is that the energy code enforcement is going to be left to the authority having jurisdiction on the procedures it wants to use to enforce the energy code. So the AHJ, or the Building Code Department, is going to establish the procedures for enforcing the energy code, the stretch energy code, because as we already talked about, this is going to take precedence over the statewide energy code. We also find an amendment that tells us that our compliance submission options are expanded. So typically in the 2021 IECC, we would just have a list of compliance materials that we can include. Those would be worksheets that we're used to, computer software printouts, manuals, analysis, like load analysis, that sort of thing, that we would rely on for compliance. Well, the stretch energy code says we can also accept the seal of the architect or engineer working on the project, or we can accept a res check compliance report. So if we are complying with the energy code using the prescriptive path, we can already submit a res check compliance report to see that total UA. But the stretch energy code is going to actually list res check as a compliance submission option. We're also going to find some amendments to the above code program. So typically we would just say it's going to be up to the code official or the authority having jurisdiction to name the programs that they will allow as above code programs. The stretch energy code says there's 3 that we're going to accept: Passive House Institute, Passive House Institute US, and then Appendix RC. Appendix RC is the Zero Energy Residential Building Provisions appendix. So it's going to essentially allow you to achieve an energy rating index and then put enough on-site renewables or solar to achieve net zero energy. In addition to meeting those program requirements, you're also going to have to meet the mandatory requirements in Table R4052 and the building thermal envelope provisions that are in the code. So exactly what is required. If you are going to comply prescriptively with the code, you'll have to also meet or exceed those values. Now, one significant change that if you are not yet on the 2021 IECC, just to mention here, is that we actually did away with the mandatory designation within this code section titles. So for example, it used to say air leakage mandatory, and that would mean that it applied to all of the compliance paths, regardless of which one you selected. We've removed that mandatory designation in the 2021 IECC and moved all of those mandatory requirements into a user-friendly table. It's actually my very favorite change in 2021 because I think it improves the usability of the code so much, and you can essentially just turn that into a checklist. But just so you are aware of what I mean by those mandatory requirements in that table, those are all of the requirements that would apply to your project regardless of the compliance path you're selecting. They're also going to apply to your project if you're using Passive House or Appendix RC as your above code program. In Chapter 1, we also get that list of construction document requirements. Those are going to include things like our U factors and details about our mechanical system, details about our lighting system, that sort of thing. We're going to find an amendment within this section that requires our solar ready zone to include it's going to require our construction documents to include all of the requirements about our solar ready zone. So I'm kind of beating to the punchline here. We are going to require solar readiness in the Illinois Stretch Code. And to support that, our construction documents need to include details about the dedicated roof area, our load details, where we're going to expect the routing of the conduit or that pre-wiring, and then plumbing to our service water heating system. To support those construction documents, we're also going to see a little bit of an expansion of those required inspections as well, specifically related to solar readiness. So we are going to find some amendments to the plumbing rough-in inspection that's going to require where the solar ready zone is installed for service water heating, our inspectors are going to have to verify the pathways for the routing of plumbing from that solar ready zone to our service water heating system. We're also going to pick up a brand new inspection, the electrical rough-in inspection. That's going to capture, among other items, any conduit or pre-wiring to the electrical panel from our solar ready zone. So not only on the construction documents do we need to include all the details about our solar ready zone, but we're also going to verify those through our inspections as well with these amendments. Chapter 2, this is our definition chapter within the IECC and all of our other codes like the Stretch Energy Code. Definitions or terms that are defined within the IECC are going to be italicized. We see that in the Stretch Energy Code as well. Where they're not defined in the IECC, our other I-code definitions are going to apply, or the common use definitions. I'm not going to go through all of the new stretch codes or the new definitions that you get with the stretch code, but I did want to kind of include a catch-all slide here just so that you're aware of them. We are going to have electric vehicle charging related terms, which we'll actually see a little bit later in today's webinar, demand response related terms, and definitions for approved source, gas heat pump space heating system, and solar ready zone. I always say that when I pick up a brand new edition of the code, I start in the definition section because that's going to help me just test my knowledge on how I thought a term was defined, make sure that I'm still in alignment with the IECC, but also you're going to pick up on a lot of those new requirements that are added. So for example, you're going to see a lot of electric vehicle charging definitions, so you can assume that there's going to be electric vehicle requirements within the body of the code. All right. So I am watching the chat. I think your questions may go to Katie, but if you do happen to throw them in the chat, I am watching that. Otherwise, we are going to go ahead and talk about chapter 4, which is really the meat of the energy code. This is where we have those residential energy efficiency requirements. As a reminder of our compliance paths, these are going to be the same whether you're following the base energy code or you're following the stretch energy code. We can comply with the residential provisions prescriptively using total building performance or using the energy rating index compliance path. The prescriptive compliance option is going to tell us the provision, it's going to tell us that we have to meet the provisions of sections R401 through R404 and R408. That's our additional energy efficiency credit section. We typically consider this to be the least flexible option because really your provisions are just outlined within the code. As long as you go and you meet each of those as you come across them, you're going to comply with the energy code. There are 3 options for our installation requirements though, which gets us into that concept of flexibility. We can either use U-factor compliance, we're looking at the performance of the entire assembly, or we can use R-value compliance, which is going to tell us the installation value for a specific component. Or we can use total UA alternative compliance, which is res check essentially. That's one way to calculate total UA. But that's where we really kind of look at an allowance for our building envelope provisions only and allow for trade-offs within the building thermal envelope. So we do see some flexibility there. Prescriptive compliance does not require any energy modeling, and you will have to choose some additional energy efficiency credits as well. Total building performance, you're going to just go to section R405. Within that section, you're going to find all of the requirements that you need to meet total building performance compliance. This is a more flexible option than the prescriptive compliance because it considers trade-offs within more of the building systems. It's going to be looking at heating, cooling, mechanical ventilation, and water heating. It does require energy modeling, and your compliance is going to be based on that table of mandatory measures. You're going to have a building thermal envelope backstop, meaning a threshold that your building envelope cannot perform worse than. And then we're going to look at the site energy use of our proposed building to the site energy use of a standard reference design. And finally, we can choose energy rating index. This is what we typically consider to be the most flexible option because it's looking at the energy efficiency of the entire building. So it expands beyond what we would see in total building performance to include things like our lighting, our appliances, orientation of the building, that sort of thing. It also requires energy modeling. And compliance is going to be based on that table of mandatory measures, just like we see in total building performance, the same building thermal envelope backstop, and then a maximum energy rating index. And one significant change in the stretch energy code is that we have an ERI value both with and without combustion equipment, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The one thing that really does set this compliance path apart is that it requires a third party. All right, chapter 4 is going to be outlined like this. We have a general section, and then we have a section for each of our systems. Then we really get into those very specific requirements based on the compliance path that you've selected for your project. So we're going to first talk about the prescriptive requirements, but then you'll see most of these prescriptive requirements are also going to be required for our other compliance paths because they are included in that list of mandatory measures. So the first significant amendment we're going to find is for demand responsiveness. We're going to see this both for thermostats and for water heating. This requirement essentially makes it so that there is a demand response control on your thermostat and on your service water heating system that allows building owners or homeowners to participate in a demand response program. The way those demand response programs work, you sign up to use it. There is some kind of a signal that is sent out in response to either a power outage. It could be a system issue on the grid. It could be some other reason. Perhaps we just need to slow the energy pull supply during a period of time. A demand response signal is sent out to those that are participating in the program, and then your thermostat or your water heater or whatever happens to be connected to demand response is going to adjust in a way that helps lower that energy use. Typically, folks that participate in a demand response program are financially incentivized. There's some kind of monetary incentive for participating. There are also a lot of benefits to demand response programs. We see fewer blackouts and brownouts. I happen to live in an area where we have brownouts all of the time, to the point where we have backup power supplies to all of our major appliances because we've replaced our dishwasher 3 times in the last 6 years. So because of brownouts specifically. So when we're talking about a demand response thermostat, the requirement within the stretch energy code is that we adjust the heating and cooling set points in response to that demand response signal incrementally. So it'll be 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees until that demand response signal is ended. And then once it's ended, your thermostat's going to go back to the set points that you had it set at. For this particular provision, our assisted living facilities are going to be exempt. For demand responsive water heating, this is going to apply to our electric storage water heaters, and gallon size and kilowatt size is going to determine whether or not you're going to have demand responsive controls. And this is again going to adjust the set point. The standards that we have associated with the demand response water heaters, they're going to ensure that you can still meet your hot water demand. So it's not that we're not getting you in a situation where it's like, oh gosh, now the whole family can't take a shower. You can still, it's going to adjust the set points, but in a way that you will hardly even notice. Water heaters in particular do play an important role in demand flexibility because they have that inherent thermal storage that's going to allow energy consumption to be shifted with little impact to us as end users. We are going to require that 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses that have an attached or detached garage must also have an EV ready space. So what you're not seeing here is how we handle those other occupancies other than 1 and 2 family dwellings that still fall under the residential code. And those are actually just going to comply with the Illinois commercial energy stretch code. So we're sending them over there, and we'll talk about that on Thursday on what the requirement is. But for our 1 and 2 family dwellings, you have to have 1 EV ready space. This particular requirement supports the CEJA goal of accelerating electric vehicle adoption. and expanding charging station infrastructure. So I know what you're thinking, what is an EV ready space? That is one of the new definitions that we get in the Stretch Energy Code. An EV ready space is going to be an automobile parking space provided with a branch circuit and either an outlet or enclosure for connection to EVSE. The EVSE is the whole thing is connected. It's ready to plug into your car. You're ready to go. Another significant amendment we're going to see is electric readiness. So this provision just ensures that a home that is built with appliances that are running on fossil fuels can easily accommodate future electric appliances and equipment. So there's nothing in here that is going to prevent a homeowner from having a gas water heater or a gas stove or whatever the case may be. We just want to make sure that where gas is selected, that enough electric infrastructure is there for the next homeowner or that current homeowner who wants to swap out equipment later can do so without retrofitting the building. This is one of those provisions where really we're looking at the future costs of retrofit and where we get some of the savings associated with that $6,500 in retrofit costs later on. And it also just helps support a CEJA goal of equitably supporting communities that face energy transitions. Our 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses are going to have some dedicated space for future PV systems. So this is that solar ready provision that I was talking about, where we're also going to include it on our construction documents, and we're going to be inspecting for it when we're in the field. We have to have a dedicated roof surface for future installation of PV. Just like we saw in the EV charging requirement, all other occupancies that fall under the residential provision or residential definition, excuse me, are going to go to the commercial Stretch Energy Code requirements. And again, this really just allows us to, during the time of construction, put in all of the infrastructure that we're going to need to be able to install a solar system later on. So we don't have the cost up front right now, but we do have the entire infrastructure there. We have an unobstructed roof. We have spaces where the conduit and plumbing can be routed, that sort of thing. We want to make sure everything is ready so that we can have a PV system in the future. And the last significant change that we see to the prescriptive provisions is a change to our additional efficiency requirements. So this is section R408. This was probably the biggest significant change in the 2021 IECC base energy code. And I would say this is probably one of the most significant changes to the Illinois stretch code as well. We essentially provide 2 options for meeting the additional efficiency requirement option or requirement, I guess. We can either choose the heat pump equipment air tightness option or the additional efficiency credit option. For projects that want to go the heat pump equipment air tightness route, you are going to have an electric heat pump for heating and cooling and a heat pump water heater. In addition to that, you will have to have an air leakage rate of 2 air changes per hour or less. And because that air leakage rate is so low, you will also have to have an ERV or an HRV. Now, the 2021 is already going to require an HRV or an ERV in climate zone 7 and 8. That's expanded in the 2024 to be 6, 7, and 8, climate zone 6, 7, and 8. So we're already seeing ERV and HRV requirements anyway. But when you take this route, we really want to make sure, because you do have that air leakage rate that's 2 or less, that you have an ERV or an HRV installed, and that it meets the minimum sensible recovery efficiency, or SRE, of 70%. When you choose this option, you do also need to make sure that that SRE of your energy recovery ventilator or your heat recovery ventilation system is included on the documentation as well. The minimum 30 credits that are required is going to be that big change that we see for additional efficiency credits. So you can see here on the right-hand side, we have 6 measure categories that you can choose those 30 credits from. So for each of our projects, you can have to choose a minimum of 30 credits. You'll have to mix and match to achieve that 30 credits because they're all worth varying number of credits just based on how that particular measure performs in our climate zones. So you can see we can choose from enhanced envelope performance, more efficient HVAC equipment, reduced energy use in service water heating systems, more efficient duct thermal distribution system, improved air sealing and efficient ventilation, or energy efficient appliances. If you do have a larger volume home, you have a 5,000 square foot home or larger, you are going to have to achieve 5 additional energy credits, so a total of 35. Katie's going to talk a little bit about the stretch energy code checklists that are available on the Energy Hub, but this is a screen grab of that checklist. I love the way that checklist is laid out. I know it was done in partnership with Mia and a couple other Slipstream and a couple other folks that I will be remiss if I don't mention that they created those and that they're excellent resources for you. This is what a screen grab of what their checklist looks like. And from this, you can get an idea of what those additional energy efficiency credits look like for our climate zones. And you will recall we have to get 30 of them. So you're going to have to mix and match quite a bit. This is obviously not a full table. It's going to go on. This is just very much a partial table of what you're going to find in R408. And you can see within each of those measure categories, we actually have several options listed within them to achieve these credits. So the whole concept of going to a credit option is really to make sure that we're implementing items within our climate zones that make sense for our specific climate zones. We're getting a specific number of credits based on the climate zone that we live in, but also the real intent is to make sure that our builders and our designers have as much flexibility as possible in achieving this additional efficiency. So they're going to typically be consulting with the homeowner. They may have other reasons that they favor some of the measures over others, maybe utility incentive programs, that sort of thing. But this really just gives our designers and our homeowners and our builders an extreme amount of flexibility in how to achieve those additional efficiency requirements. So those are the significant changes that we see throughout the prescriptive compliance path, and we're going to see those brought into our other compliance paths as well. So when we're talking about section R408, this is our total building performance. It's called simulated building performance in the 2024, which is why I have accidentally labeled it that way in this slide. We kind of bounce back and forth between those two terms. In the stretch code, it's called total building performance. Section R405, this is our performance option. We talked a little bit about how it's more flexible than prescriptive. We do have to meet the mandatory requirements in table R4052, the building envelope backstop requirements, and our site energy use requirements. So what do these look like? These are really what I consider the foundational requirements of this section. And we do have changes to each of these in the stretch code. So the first is just an updated mandatory requirement table. This is a screen grab from what you'll see if you use Digital Codes Premium. You can see that the blue means that it was added in the 2021. It wasn't really added in 2021, but the table itself was added in 2021, which is why everything shows up blue. But the red is specific to the Illinois stretch code amendments. So you can see here, even though those showed up in the performance or in the prescriptive path, that our EV infrastructure requirements, our electric readiness requirements, and our renewable energy infrastructure requirements or solar readiness are also going to apply to our projects if we're using total building performance. The other change to this compliance path is an update to the backstop. So in the 2021 base code, our envelope backstop, meaning the minimum the minimum performance of our building thermal envelope, is going to be the 2009 IECC. We've updated that backstop in the residential stretch code. Now what it is a multiplier of 1.1 or about 110% of the UA of a prescriptive project, meaning we're going to look at the U factor. We're going to multiply that by the area for each of our building thermal envelope assemblies. We're going to total that all up, and that will be the UA of our prescriptive design. Our proposed design has to be that UA times 1.1 or less. So we essentially get about 110% that we can play with for our building thermal envelope. And this is really important because it keeps us from having to reference older versions of the code. And as the stretch code improves, or the next iteration of the stretch code, you're going to be using those UA requirements that are built into the stretch code itself. So there's no longer any need to go back to previous versions of the energy code. And this also allows you to make up for that efficiency somewhere else within your building. So we're not requiring you to have the exact same building thermal envelope as you would if you were complying prescriptively. So there is an element of trade-off here. You can make up for that in your heating, cooling, ventilation, whatever it may be. However, we do still want to make sure that your building thermal envelope is a very well-designed, very well-performing envelope. And finally, the site energy use of our proposed design has to be 71% or less of the site energy use of the standard reference design. So this is a little bit different for those of us that use the base energy code. Typically, when we're talking about total or simulated building performance compliance, we're talking about energy cost. This is a compliance path that compares the energy cost of our proposed design to the energy cost of our reference design. However, the stretch energy code is going to change that metric from energy cost to site energy. And that's so that we can help meet those CEJA site energy index reduction goals. So we want to be looking at the same metrics that we would be looking at to meet those CEJA goals. And the final compliance path we have is section R406. This is our energy rating index compliance path option. To comply with this, well, I guess to back up a little bit, this compliance option is looking at the energy efficiency of our building. So it's not looking at site energy use the way that total building performance is. It's looking at the energy efficiency of our building. And typically this is looking at loads. That's essentially what the energy rating index is looking at. This is going to be a scale from 0 on up, where a score of 100 it means that you meet the 2006 IECC compliance, and then a score of 0 is that you have a 0 energy building. And each 1 point reduction in energies is going to be a 1 point reduction on this index. Meaning if you have a home like the one on this certificate, where you have a score of 45, you're performing 55% better than a home that's built to the 2006 IECC. There are a couple significant changes within this section. First, we need to know that you have to comply with the mandatory requirements table. You're going to have the same building thermal envelope backstop. So for both that mandatory requirement table and that thermal envelope backstop, those are going to be the same that we would see in the total building performance. So I'm not going to cover those changes again, just because they're the exact same that we see in total building performance. And then we also have to meet the energy rating index values in table R406.5. The big difference between the 2021 IECC and what we find in the Illinois stretch code is that we have 2 ERI scores that we have to achieve. Well, depending on whether or not we have combustion equipment in our project. If we have essentially an all-electric home, then our ERI score in climate zone 4 is 54 and climate zone 5 is 55. We do have a reduced ERI score if we have combustion equipment. So where we do have any kind of gas, water heater, gas, space conditioning equipment, whatever the case may be, we are going to have a lower ERI score. We're going to have to improve the energy efficiency of our building by 3 to 5% if we have combustion equipment installed. All right, so my next couple of slides, which will be available in the handout, are just listing those resources that I've already talked about. One additional resource I wanted to point out was the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. You're probably familiar with the work that they do, but they do also support the Building Energy Hub, as well as they've partnered on some of the resources that I mentioned and that Katie's going to mention. But all of the links I dropped in the chat, as well as some of the other studies and that sort of thing, are going to be available in the resource section. And I am going to turn it back over to Katie to finish out the presentation, and she will facilitate the discussion of any questions that you may have had while we went through those amendments.
Thank you so much, Jerica. Very thorough. I learned a lot of things, so I hope everyone else did as well. Jerica shared a lot of great resources. I'm just sharing a few that are linked on the Building Energy Hub website as well. Include the guides that were created by IECC earlier this year for the stretch code. There's also the compliance checklist that she mentioned, that she showed a few tables from those. That's a longer version, but definitely something worth looking at if you're going through and wanting to look line by line what's changed. And then if you wanted a short and quick version to just have a commercial stretch code primer or residential stretch code primer, CDEC has some great resources as well. It's more like a 3 or 4 page version of what we're talking about versus a 7 or 8 page version or a 20 page version. So you have all the different ways you can learn about the stretch code through the links on the resources here, as well as what Jerica shared. On the next slide, there are a few resources as well. There's a municipal resources page. So if your municipality or someone that's involved in codes, your municipality is interested in learning more about the stretch code, the Building Energy Hub has a list of resources created by partners here as well. And feel free and download any of those that will help you with your decision on adopting the stretch code. And then on the next slide, we just have some resources around finance opportunities. So a lot of times it comes down to cost on building and construction and retrofits. And so there's a great resource here on the hub page for different building types and sizes and the different types of funding, financing, and incentives and rebates available for different eligibilities of the building types here. Next slide. And finally, we also have a hub help desk. So if you have any questions that you weren't able to ask today or come up later, we can help direct your question to the right expert. You can contact the hub help desk anytime. It's staffed all the time by email, by phone, and by filling out a form, submitting your question. So just wanted to share this resource as well as signing up for our newsletter and following us on LinkedIn for updates that we send pretty regularly. So thank you again, Jerica. I'm looking to see if there's any questions in the chat, but it seems like you explained it so well that no one has any questions. Just everyone wants to look at the resources later. So with that, I think we'll wrap up early. Thank you again, Jerica, for co-hosting this event with us. Very knowledgeable on the subject, and Jerica just put her email in the chat again if you need any assistance afterwards. So thank you again for joining the Building Energy Hub and IECC for this residential stretch code workshop, and we'll see you hopefully on Thursday for commercial. Thanks and have a great afternoon.